So the IPCC has just released a big new climate report, and it's pretty alarming considering it's been accurately described as a code red for humanity. Luckily, there aren't any big new bombshells in the report, but unluckily it kind of lays out how our climate is still pretty near doomed. And this constant onslaught of doom confirmation that basically makes up most of climate news can be pretty debilitating, even paralyzing. There have already been some great explanations of this report and climate primers from YouTubers like Zenturo and Hank Green. So right now I want to take a minute to talk about proactive action we can take to help make the situation better and to help fight climate change, as opposed to just making the same old joke about the world ending for the 800th time.
You say the whole world's ending, honey, it already did.
And when I say all, I'm talking about people in the US because I'm in the US. Most of the people watching this video are probably going to be from the US, and I can really only speak to strategies for the US. However, strategies I'm going to talk about in this video are most likely applicable in many other countries. So right off the bat, things are pretty bad, and we're not doing enough or really much at all to make the things less bad. To fix that, we need significant, gargantuan political change. And to some people that means overthrowing capitalism. However, I'm a bit on the fence on whether the global political system of capital will be able to be overthrown in, say, the next year, and that's how quick we need climate action. So it's probably going to be more something of working within the system to change it. That means laws and policies to help transition from fossil fuels to renewable energies and to decarbonize basically every other sector. And if not decarbonize, basically lower the emissions drastically enough that our climate's doing okay. Luckily, we have all of Congress and the presidency controlled by the party that at least says they want to fight climate change. Republicans and conservatives could be about fighting climate change. There's nothing I can think of that's more conservative than conserving our natural world, but for the most part, it just seems like they're not. There are exceptions like Bob Inglis and a lot of young Republicans who seem to be more on board with climate change and making that a priority. However, by and large, the party is not very supportive of strong climate action. They're generally supportive of things like plant scrubbing and carbon sequestration investment, but that's about it. And that's nowhere near enough to make significant strides in combating climate change. If and when they have control of either or both halves of Congress and or the presidency, we're going to have to provide pressure to them to make significant climate action happen. But right now, we need to capitalize on the fact that the president and all of Congress say that climate change is a big issue for them and that they want to help solve it. We need action right now for the climate, and we need action right now because Democrats are in charge. So things have lined up fairly nicely. However, a lineup like this can end as quickly as next year. So action is needed this year. And how do we achieve such action? Well, I'm glad you asked. The answer is through budget reconciliation. At least that's the answer right now. That's the most pressing thing. The infrastructure bill is roughly finalized and pending some sort of big upset, which could happen. It's kind of set in stone and has some climate provisions, but not a huge amount. It is also something that needs to be voted for by 10 Republicans in addition to all of the Democrats, so it's something that's not going to have as strong of climate measures, as opposed to something like the budget reconciliation package, which only needs 50 plus 1 blue votes, and as such can have a lot more climate policy. It's also something that's still more up in the air in terms of what specifics are going to be inside it. It's passed the Senate and it's now in the House, but even still, it could go either way in terms of what's kept in the final package versus what's taken out. So we need action now, and we have an avenue to come about that action. Great. Enter me, you, us, the public, everyone. We need to make sure that every single one of our representatives and senators know that climate change is a forefront issue for us, their constituents, and that it's something they should prioritize, especially in legislation and in the budget reconciliation package. We need to make it clear how big of an issue climate change is for Americans. And this would apply to other countries as well, making their politicians know that climate change is one of the major issues that they need to take a stand on. Things are currently a little bit testy between some of the moderate Democrats and some of the progressive Democrats. The moderates are a bit concerned with the overall price of the package, and they're more willing to sacrifice climate initiatives. The progressives are pretty staunch on the climate action and have said they're not going to vote for the package if it doesn't include strong climate action. So if you live in a state or district with a moderate Democrat, it's doubly important that you make your voice heard. And for the rest of us who are in blue or red districts or states, it's desperately important that we make our voices heard and we let our politicians politicians, elected officials know that climate change is a vitally important issue for the planet and for us as voters, since that's a big part of what determines politicians' stances on things, what people in their district are all about. People in West Virginia are not as big on climate change on average, so Joe Manchin isn't as big on climate change on average. So if you live in West Virginia, you have an amazing opportunity to help enact some big change by telling Joe not to shoot climate legislation figuratively and literally. So how do we do this? How do we get our voices to be heard? Well, it's pretty simple. You can email, you can call, you can send a telegram, a postcard, a telegraph, any form of communication that you fancy. Just get the word out directly to the office of your senator or representative. Even better, get your friends and family to do so too. And when you contact them, it can be really easy. You can either write up a mock email, you can read off a script like me, and just say, "Hi, I'm blank and I'm a constituent. I wanted to contact you today to tell you that we need climate action and I want you to do your best to include it in the reconciliation package and in future legislation for that matter." You can tell them to support things like carbon pricing, which is something that the Citizens Climate Lobby, which I'm a part of, pushes for through our carbon fee and dividend. It's a just and effective way to lower carbon emissions without raising the price on everyday American households. You can tell them to support clean electricity standards, which help transfer our grids from fossil fuels to renewable and clean energy. You can tell them to support in general initiatives for clean and renewable energy, to support electric vehicles, to support public transportation. You can even tell them to support carbon sequestration, since while we shouldn't bank on sucking carbon out of the air to solve climate change for us, it can be part of a broader set of solutions. All of these things are good things to have: a carbon price, a clean electricity standard, more public transportation, but no one of them are going to solve climate change. So when you're telling your elected official that you want climate action, you can mention any of these that seems to tickle your fancy, or just a single one that you think is the most important. The main goal is that we get significant climate action in the budget reconciliation, in legislation, and that can take many forms. Overall, it's vital to make it known to them how important this action is. Any projection that has the climate in any form of okay by the year 2030 or 2050 or 2100 has us taking immediate action this year and every year throughout the decade, let alone the next 2 decades and beyond. There's a reason I call my stuff 2030, and that's because that's going to be the year, the time that we see, have we taken significant action to put us on a road that's kind of okay, or have we kind of stalled out and continued a lack of action and put ourselves in a position that's basically like, oh, this is getting continual horrors throughout our climate every year, and that's just going to keep happening. I'll be sure to include a link or two in the description that will make it even easier to contact your officials. There's one from CCL where you just put in your information and it hooks you up with your representative and your senators, and it even gives you a mock email that you can personalize to send to them. And then you can use that same mock email as a template for saying a script when you call them, or you can do a script like I did just earlier in this video. And feel free to include any of the solutions that I've talked about or any more, since there are plenty more solutions. Obviously, I'm a little biased to carbon pricing because that's something CCL is big about, but any and all that you choose will be a benefit. And speaking of volunteering for a climate organization, you might be asking, okay, so I send an email or a phone call to my representative and I get an automated bland reply that doesn't really mean much. Is that what I can do to help stop climate change? Is that meaningful action? One, yes, it is, and it's even better if you get your family and friends and more people to do so. But if you're asking, is there anything more you can do? Well, I'm glad to hear you ask that, and unsurprising to the theme of this video, the answer is of course yes. You can join a climate organization, and you're in luck because we have lots of them. We have nonprofits, we have NGOs, we have normal enterprises, we have government positions, we have government groups. When it comes to groups fighting climate change, there is no dearth these days. So if you're not working in the field of climate or sustainability, you're probably going to want to just volunteer for a group, and there are plenty of options for that. As I said before, I'm part of CCL, Citizens Climate Lobby, which pushes for a carbon fee and dividend, which is a way to lower carbon emissions by making them more costly, but redistributing that money to American households so they don't pay the brunt of the increased cost. I highly recommend them. They've been great the whole time I've been with them. There are also other organizations kind of like CCL, like Climate Reality Project or 350.org. Those are like broad organizations working for political change. And there are more youth-focused organizations like Extinction Rebellion and the Sunrise Movement, both of which are more direct action in the sense of protests and demonstrations, as opposed to something that's a bit more drier through the legislation route, kind of like CCL. All the organizations are pushing for political and legislative change, and they all come together with plenty of other organizations to form the movement fighting climate change and fighting for significant climate action. action. Most of these groups also have specific regional hubs, so you'll be able to find a group near you, and with the many options of the groups, you're probably bound to find one that you fit decently well into. Now, you could do climate action on your own, and that's great, it can still have significant effect, but you're probably going to be more productive and less prone to burnout if you're working with a group of somewhat like-minded individuals, because they're going to have a lot of resources and professional expertise in this field that you might not have just because they're a large group of people with the same aim, and combining efforts to achieve a shared goal can oftentimes be a lot stronger than doing it alone. And when it seems like the world is kind of ignoring or not aware of its biggest problem, it can feel pretty easy to feel like you're going a little crazy if you're spending a lot of your time in that and no one around you really seems to have the same level of fear, concern, or desire to make a significant change to not have this problem continue to get worse. So we have something to push for right now, climate action and legislation, especially through budget reconciliation, and we can achieve that by contacting our elected officials and representatives to making it known to them that this is very important, this needs to happen now. And we have a path to keep pressure on indefinitely, which most often takes the form of working with an organization or group to continue activism and pressure for climate action. We are living in a very scary time, one where it can seem like the world is ending and the world either doesn't realize that or doesn't really care. But we can make things better, and there is reason to hope for a better future. We started this problem. We, like humankind, I didn't start climate change, and we can be the ones to end it, or at least make it not as terrible. So get to calling and get your friends and family to do it too. Feel free to share this video as a resource to anyone wondering about climate action or things they can do. Make sure you watch the other videos by Hank and Zenturo, since they're great resources. Hank has a video all about US action as well, which is kind of just, I'm just echoing a lot of what he said in this video, in that video, or I'm echoing what he said in that video, in this video. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.